Truth no more matters. The real matter thing is perception nowadays, and what the globe is thinking about the war in Iran. I am Professor Dr. B. We collected data from nearly all of the continents, from Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Mexico, and Germany. And we conducted really interesting statistical analysis. If you are ready, let's start. I'm Professor Dr. B, and my work generally focuses on data analysis and the communication studies. So we gather data from every 6 countries from all over the continent, and you can reach more information about the data from the description of the video. So let's go to the home and see the real data analysis.
Professor, one of the interesting questions in the data is which country is perceived as the strongest in the region? We asked this and said, in your opinion, which is the strongest country in this region? The options included Turkey, Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Qatar. Here, Israel emerged as the leader. Of course, in Mexico with 32%, in Germany with 35%, and in China with 40%, Israel is considered the strongest actor here. There is something among the exceptions, except for one exception, which I think is interesting. Apart from that, countries that see themselves directly chose themselves. For example, Egypt chose itself with 79%. I mean, bro, what are you doing? It's not that much. I mean, Egypt. When it came to Egyptians, they immediately selected themselves. The same applies to Saudi Arabia here. They also chose themselves with 69%. But the second country, when we ask who is the strongest, meaning when we move away from the subjective, is Israel. So where is the exception? Russia, Professor. Russia has placed Turkey as the first option among these countries with 26%. Raise the flags. The Russians said Turkey is the most important actor in this region. In second place, both Iran and Israel are together with 20%. Apart from that, I also asked this. I asked about the assassinations of Khamenei and Ahmadinejad. We provided a statement like, were these assassinations necessary? Here, Professor, the highest participation, meaning those who said yes, this was necessary, was from Germany. They said yes with 42%. The assassination of Khamenei was necessary. The lowest participation is 28% in Egypt and 29% in China. You will see the rankings of the other countries here anyway. There is a similar trend with Ahmadinejad, and I think his assassination, well, I don't know, but it seemed to me very much like a show of power, to be honest. But for example, I was expecting much lower rates here compared to Khamenei. However, there is only a decrease between 5% and 8%. Yes, there is a decrease in all countries compared to Khamenei, but 5% to 8%, meaning we don't see very low rates. We see very low rates and many other interesting things as well, let me say that. We also asked this, Professor, among these countries, Israel, the United States, and Iran, which country's statements do you trust the most? Professor, we saw only one answer here without exception. All countries have shown that they trust the statements of the United States the most. Here, the highest rate is 80% in Mexico, and the lowest rate is 53% in Russia. So, among them, Russia has the least trust in American media. Except for one country, Professor, all countries showed Iran as the second, which I find to be among the interesting data. So in all countries except one, Israel emerges as the country least trusted for official statements. In which country is this different? Only in Germany. In Germany, the first place is, of course, the United States. In second place, Israel comes out. And in third place is Iran with 10.16%. And in second place is Israel with 21%. Only Germany is different here. Generally, worldwide, Israel's situation really seemed interesting to me. Their statements do not create trust. Look, they acknowledge that it is strong. We will talk about other things later. They say yes to certain things there as well. But here, they say that among these 3 societies, these 3 countries, Israel is definitely considered the country least trusted for official statements. Again, one of the interesting data, in my opinion, was this. So where do you learn this information from? From social media, television, or online newspapers? We provided options. Here, the entire world except Germany said from social media. My primary source is social media. Germany stands out as a very interesting country here. I can't imagine what kind of life there is. Because people in Germany say that they learn from TV as their first source. For the second source, they say online news outlets. But only in this era, social media comes in third place. For the German society, news sources are also completely different. And generally, Germany has always diverged from other societies as if they live in another world. Again, we gave an expression like this, Professor. In your opinion, how will the world evolve from now on? We had 4 options here. A world where the West is more hegemonic, meaning we talked about a world where America is more prominent, where China and Russia, meaning their sphere of influence increases, and it could be a bipolar world, a world where regional stabilization is disrupted for a much longer time, and chaos prevails. And fourthly, a world where all these international institutions collapse and lose their meaning. Meaning we talked about a transformation into a world where whoever is stronger will do as they wish. Here, sir, we saw this in 4 out of 6 countries. The option where regional stabilization was disrupted and chaos emerged was the most common. Here, by the way, they could select more than one option. Saudi Arabia, Russia, Germany, and Mexico said that there would be turmoil in that region afterwards. As for the second one, in other words, the option of a new world where China and Russia are more dominant was mostly selected by China and Egypt. I think Russia is interesting here, because generally everyone has a reflex to press a button related to their own country when they see it. We have seen this in all questions from the beginning. For example, Egypt marked that it is the most powerful country in the region with 79%. I mean, that's not very reasonable, dear Egyptians, because what you said will be broadcast in dubbed English. Hopefully we won't upset the Egyptian people. So, China did something when it saw this, but for example, at least in our survey data, Russia did not show this reflex. I think it was one of the interesting ones. We also asked who would profit at the end of this war. We asked who would win at the end of this war. In Germany, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, they said no one. That is, at the end of this war, no one will win. Everyone will lose. We were left with the options of either America or, Iran. The Iran option did not come out as a priority in any country. In all other matters, they overwhelmingly said that at the end of this war, America would emerge stronger from here. At least it is clear that America has managed the perception in this way. We also asked this about both Netanyahu and Donald Trump. We said, I think Donald Trump is truly a successful leader. I believe he is a successful leader. We made the same statement for Netanyahu. By the way, the rates are very low here. Look, the rates are high in everything. The rate of America's victory was high, and following America was high. It was high when it came to America's power. But here, the highest rate, sir, is in Egypt, Germany, and Mexico. In Mexico, 28% agreed with this statement. In others, 21%. For Netanyahu, the situation is very, very bad. That is, people are reactive. That is, it is clear that a large majority of the world is reactive. Because the highest participation for this statement was 16% in Germany, 13% in Mexico. Apart from that, we dropped the single-digit numbers. 8 in China, 6 in Russia, 3 in Egypt, 4 in Saudi Arabia. So you see the reaction. There is indeed a clear stance among people regarding what Netanyahu has done. These low rates are so low that I haven't done statistical analysis for the 3% and 4%. I actually should have done it. The number was indistinguishable from zero, meaning essentially no one participated. When we look at the difference in the statistical analysis in between, it probably won't differ from zero. Without getting into too much technical detail, fundamentally, not thinking of Netanyahu as a successful leader isn't an objective thought process there. It's not about being successful or unsuccessful. Because if you accept him as strong, he has a successful leadership at a certain point to have created such a powerful perception in this region. But people rightly think that the guy bombs whatever he wants, carries out assassinations. Actually, he's a huge threat to the peace of this region. I really think so too. This reaction has indeed been reflected here. It's clear that's why these rates are so low. In no other statement did we see such low single-digit figures, where society stands together. By the way, I wanted to understand this perception. I wondered who people in Iran perceive as stronger, the opposition or the current government, the current regime. So we asked this question. Here were our options. You can perceive both sides as strong separately. You could also say they are equal or that you are unsure. From my own perspective, of course, from my limited worldview, it seemed to me that the opposition's power was at least substantial in the eyes of society. Of course, I don't mean in terms of actual power. I don't mean the power to overthrow the government, but there was a sense that they were quite numerous in society. However, it's very interesting, sir, that in all countries except Mexico, the current regime, meaning the government, is perceived as the truly strong segment in society. Only Mexico has a societal perception that the opposition is stronger. So the world seems to have made a decision here too. They say the regime in Iran is actually very strong. Let's see what the future will show. We will all see together here. In this context, to understand how effective Iran's military power is to some extent, we presented the following statement. We presented the statement, Iran's missiles are effective, Iran's missiles are becoming effective. Sir, if you remember, in our last survey, participation in Turkey was only 24%. So the belief that Iran's missiles are effective was 24%. I think looking back objectively, this is actually a reasonable thought, because Iran actually has so many missiles. Despite sending them, when we look at the reasonable damage caused, it is actually much more extensive. Even in the last video, I remember I thought the reason why it appeared so strong in the USA and Israel and was perceived as weak in Turkey was due to good propaganda, that a good propaganda was conducted by American and Israeli media to make the intervention by Iran reasonable. And this was the reason for the high perception. But when we look at the world, we see a similar trend. For example, in Russia, those who say it is effective, those who truly say it is effective, meaning those who gave scores like 5, 6, 7, are 83%. In Egypt, it's 82%. These are very high percentages. The lowest percentage is in Germany, which is 38%. So overall, the majority of the world says Iran's missiles are truly effective. We also asked a question in the context of the military power of two countries, namely the USA and Israel. Of course, this expression changed a little. We said again that the military power and technology of the United States and similarly Israel are higher, more than my country. Here I was most curious about China and Russia in these two expressions. I guess you are curious about it too. I wonder what the Chinese and Russians think regarding whether the military power and technology of the USA and Israel are above their own country. Sir, Russia and China frankly surprised me. 62% of China participated, saying America's military power is more than ours. Only 19% did not agree in China, by the way. There are also those who are unsure. In Russia, 46% participated, which forms the majority. Why? Because only 40% disagreed. So there is an acceptance of America's military power, also in the societies of these two major states. In other countries, Egypt is at 60%, Saudi Arabia at 54%. Germany is very interesting, sir. When considered among the strong countries, Germany says 78% say America is much stronger than us. And in Mexico, it comes up as 70%. Israel is slightly different. Regarding Israel, sir, there are only two countries where the majority of society acknowledges that Israel is stronger. Germany, I'm saying 55%. Germany is very interesting. I couldn't understand the German people. I mean, in the results of this survey, truly all the answers they gave turned out contrary to my expectations. Then Mexico agrees at 63%. Again, we wanted to understand what kind of perception civilian casualties lead to in the context of this intervention in the eyes of society. For this, the following was asked. Yes, despite civilian casualties, this military operation was necessary to remove the Iranian regime. We had such an expression. Now, regarding participation in this statement, we see very clearly. Fundamentally, Muslim countries here put up a very clear opposition, because participation here is only 27% and 33% for Saudi Arabia and Egypt. 33% in Saudi Arabia, 27% in Egypt. Overall, I found this interesting. So, do you know which country agrees most that this operation is necessary despite civilian casualties? Russia, with 59%, followed by China and Germany, with 45% and 46%. The fact that this operation, despite civilian casualties, received so much approval in Russia was one of the most interesting aspects to me. And again, we posed a question about whether there could be positive outcomes for the Iranian people as a result of this operation. Here too, with Russia and China, I honestly couldn't quite make sense of it. In terms of approval of operations, a completely different situation arises from the anti-American and anti-Israel sentiment here, especially in the context of Russia and China, particularly China. There's clearly something good between Russia with Putin and Trump in the society's eyes, but for such a thing to exist in China's eyes really seemed interesting to me. And participation in this statement is 66% in Russia, 56% in China. So a large majority says yes, it will be better for the Iranian people. Germany at 51%, again, low countries, mostly Muslim countries. Egypt at 43%, Saudi Arabia at 37%, and Mexico is also a conscientious country. They are also at 32%. Participation is low. One of the countries with low participation in this statement. And our statement that the whole world agrees on, and again, a single country diverges, sir. We said something like this. This thing we call international law is only applied to weak countries, brother. Nothing is applied to weak countries. They do whatever they want. We see it, I think so too. Most of the world agrees at this point, sir. Saudi Arabia with 73%, Egypt with 72%, Russia with 79%, China with 70%, and Mexico with 60% say yes. This is called an international rule. It is only applied to us. It is only applied to those weak countries. Although we cannot say that China and Russia are that weak, which is the only one that doesn't agree. Germany. 46% said yes. They approved, by the way. By the way, this becomes the majority because 31% are undecided. But Germany is really an interesting case in this whole world. Why? Germany is clearly a country where rules are strictly followed, considered correct to follow them, and the results of obeying rules are very clearly seen. Because of this, they trust the law, especially international law. Because you might have seen it in German society. Those who have seen it or lived there would know. I've spent some time there myself. You see, there is this mentality in German society. There is a rule, and that rule will be followed. If that rule is not followed, there will be a penalty, and this is how it works in society. This is probably a reflection of how things function in international law. However, when it comes to international law, I also think, like the vast majority of the rest of the world, at least according to our data, a clear situation where it is only applied to weak countries. And of course, nuclear. So what is at the center of the whole debate now? Nuclear power. And we asked it like this. This right should be given to all countries in the world. We presented a statement saying that all countries should be given the right to possess and use nuclear weapons. Participation, meaning high participation, only occurred in Egypt. 61%. The rest of the world said, no, this is not the right thing. And participation in statements turned out to be very low. Lists will appear here again. We had a question about selfishness. What kind of question was this? We said, imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and this has happened. Conflicts have disappeared and peace has come. But as a result, the economic situation in my country has become much worse. In this case, we gave a statement saying, I wish the war hadn't ended. At least the answers here are nice in this regard. The majority of the world did not say yes to a war continuing there for their own economic interests. The highest rate came from Egypt and China. Only 29% when I say the highest rate, by the way. The lowest rate was in Russia, 13%, and then Germany with the lowest rate of 16%. I think it's nice. At least it's somewhat promising. One of the outcomes emerged for this question. Yes, sir, these are the data we have. We will probably conduct much more detailed analyses in future videos. But right now, I think it's important to quickly reveal what the general perception of the world is. We actually plan to make these videos in the long term. We measured it now, and it will be much clearer to see how the perception changes in the future, who starts to lose more. However, as a start, it presents interesting data as of now. Of course, this is also a fact, sir. Data and so on can't actually describe the pain being experienced right now. As I always say, elephants clash above, sir, while the grass is trampled below. In the end, it's the civilians who suffer. I think it happens to countries with weaker armies and who have much more difficulty defending themselves in all these wars and developments. See you in future videos with much better news.